We have a very special guest, Michael Cerami, here today on the show to talk all things Cubs. Next.
You are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Sam Olber. I'm a lifelong fan, taking my passion into a discussion with you on all things Cubs. Thank you for being a part of the show and making Locked On Cubs your first listen today. And the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day, like the video, and leave a comment below. This episode of Locked On Cubs is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even in your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. And today we have a very special guest that I am really excited about, Michael Cerami from Bleacher Nation. To me, the top Cubs website blog out there. If you guys haven't checked it out, you really should. I don't think there's been a 24-hour period in like the last 10 years during a Cubs season I've gone without reading some of their stuff. So, Michael, thanks so much for having me on, and excited to talk Cubs with you.
Yeah, first of all, excellent intro. You said you don't. That's not usually that was great. Very fancy. I like the graphics. I like you powered right through that. Excellent. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about the Cubs too.
So I have a lot of questions for you because I watch and listen. I listen and read a lot of your stuff, and the first thing I want to ask you about is just kind of what did you expect this season to be? What were your expectations? I thought that this was going to be a good team, a team that was good defensively. I think I predicted them right around 87 wins, and they were going to be in it all the way. And, obviously I'm disappointed. I want to know what your expectations were heading into the season and kind of where you're at right now with them.
Yeah, I actually was talking to Brett Taylor, the other writer at Bleacher Nation, about this today. We were sort of, laughing at ourselves because after one win over the Orioles, we're like, hey, not bad, actually. No, and so the issue or the crux of the answer to this question, it kind of boils down to, I think I saw this team as an 85 to 88 win team, which I think probably gets you into the playoffs this year. Maybe not wins the division, but gets you into the playoffs. And I think what has happened, setting aside the talent, is that they've played obviously a lot below that pace. And even if they play at that pace from here on out, which I think is not unreasonable to assume, I think they have an easier second half. The bullpen's healing up. Some guys are finally hitting their stride offensively. They've already played at a 70 win pace for too long that an 88 win pace doesn't get you there anymore. So the answer is difficult because I see them playing above 500 baseball from here, but not relative to their entire schedule or the way they performed in the first half of the year. I think the reason I think that is something it's no longer a novel point, but I think it's still an important one, is that this team has a boatload of good players and very few, if any, standout players or stars. I think it's fair to say that Shota has performed like a star. I think Justin Steele probably is a star, but missed a big chunk of the season. But then, offensively, no one really took that huge leap. Michael Busch has obviously been good. Ian Happ's been good, but it was inconsistent and they weren't good the entire way. So they're a team that just has a lot of good players. That's how you end up with that 88 win team in your head or whatever. But they've dug themselves too deep of a hole, in my opinion, to end up there by the end of this year. So at this point, they're, if they manage to go on some sort of hot streak and avoid selling off or sell off in a way that is only selling superfluous players that maybe open a pathway for PCA to play in center by trading Cody, or a different starter to get healthy by trading Tyone, the only way that they're going to make the playoffs at this point is if they sneak in with an 84 win team because everyone continues to be terrible and they beat all the tiebreakers, which they don't have. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. They're a good team that has way underperformed, but even if they perform relative to expectations going forward, it's probably not going to be enough.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at as well, and I think it's smart to say we are recording this before Game 2 of the Orioles, so we're a little bit happier than we probably would have been maybe even after this game tonight, but we'll see. So I want to throw a little curveball at you, because this is something that I talk about on the show a lot, and it's, it's like an analytics based question, and it's not that I am at all anti WRC plus or anti WOBA. I'm not. There's a place for it in the game. But what frustrates me, this is more as a fan, is that when you look right now, and I saw people on Twitter today, when you look, Ian Happ's having a nice season statistically now. Michael Bush has been really good. I almost think that he should be excluded from what I'm about to say, because he's a rookie and he's been way above expectations. Seiya Suzuki has had a fine offensive campaign for the most part. But yet this team went 2 months where they were basically the worst offense in baseball. And my question to you is when you look at the back of the baseball card and you look at 162 and you look at these individual numbers, do you think there's a better way we could analyze these players with like the consistency element of it, or the clutchness of it? And the best example I could give you is, if a guy for 2 months slashes, let's say 200, 300, 350, and then for a 2-week stretch slashes 400, 500, 600, his overall numbers are probably going to be above average at that point, but they still really, really hurt the team. And to be fair to Happen, Seiya and those guys, it's not their fault. This would be a totally different conversation if Dansby and Morell stepped up in June. And you can't choose when you get hot. But do you think that we have to evaluate it maybe a little bit differently, even though those guys are having fine years, because they were still a part of a big reason why we're here with that just dreadful 2 months? Or am I overthinking it?
No, I think that's a good point. I think you kind of crossed two things there, though, and I have pretty interesting thoughts on both of them, or things that I have found interesting in the past. And one of them is this idea of especially WRC plus, which is a relative statistic, right? So it balances out not just what stadium or ballpark you're playing in, but also the year and the relative performance of all those players. And I've been actually dying to sort of ask this question to a front office person some point myself, not even for an article, just because I actually want to know. And is the only thing that actually matters relative statistics? So set aside your time period piece of it, because I haven't thought on that too. But like, for example, Ian Happ's guy, he's like a 132 weighted runs created plus this year, right? Something like right around there. Maybe it's 131, maybe it's 133. But his slash line, looks pretty similar to last year, which went, or even a little worse when that was like a 126, because it was a better hitting offensive environment. And then my question there is sort of like, is the relative to the rest of your peers the only thing that matters? And I think the answer is yes, because it's like, is there anything objectively beneficial about hitting 300, or is it just appreciably hard that only the top 5? I'm using hitting 300 as a metaphor for any benchmark of any type of stat that is not, or is it just that it's the top 5% of players? And if no one hit 300 and most people only, the best 10% of players only hit 250, would 250 then be and so you get my point, is that it goes, when you look, and the answer, I think, for what I'm getting at, is that at an enjoyment level, or your own historical relative measuring level, you go, Haps, yeah, he's having a good year, but he's hitting 256. Like, it's like, well, because 256 isn't the same thing anymore, right? So that's an interesting thing, because I don't think it's as simple as it's purely relative, because, for example, think about hard hit rate. 95 miles per hour or above, according to StatCast, is a hard hit ball, right? That wasn't picked subjectively. That is a level above which a certain threshold of balls are more likely to fall for hits than on the spectrum of probabilities than the next standard deviation down. So that's not subjective or relative. That's like a meaningful. Sure. And so I don't know how that factors into this sort of conversation. So that's one part. The other part is the timeliness of your performance. And actually I have kind of competing thoughts here as well. And I read a Fangraphs article years ago, literally, I think before I even started working at Bleacher Nation. So 2014 or earlier. And it has stuck with me ever since. And it was describing asking or positing the question of what is more valuable, a player that is, it was about a pitcher who One day throws a 9-inning shutout, and the next day throws, gives up 10 runs in 1 inning. And he does that alternating throughout the whole year, or a pitcher that goes, 6 innings and 4 runs every single time. Right. And you could make the math make sense, but that's the general
great
idea.
example. Yeah.
And they had actually decided that the guy who is occasionally dominant, even though he has terrible blowups, is like more impactful to the bottom line winning. And I think that that's probably applicable to hitters, but maybe even to a greater extent, because all hitters go through slumps, and there's 8 other guys every day that should be going through their own version of ups and downs. And so when we look at someone like Ian Happ, or even Michael Busch, who had a tough go of it too, his overall numbers and the hot stretch that he's had, it should be appreciated and valued as such, because it shouldn't be that there's no offense that can score unless Ian Happ is on. There should be other players on the team that are able to fill in the gaps of when he is, of course, going to slump, because literally everybody does, except for the very, very best in their very best seasons. So, I tend to think that a player with the higher ceiling that actually achieves it during the year for a period of time, even if they're a little streaky, is inherently a little bit more valuable than a guy who might, like Cody Bellinger, who's like, 105 the whole year. I don't know. Is he impacting winning more than Ian Happ? I don't think so. I don't think he is. You know what I mean? So, But obviously Happ had a much lower valley, and he's just having a higher peak now. And I think the higher peak carries more, wins or tallies in the win column.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting conversation, because it's just like, it's trying to figure out, and I think the best point you made is that, using Happ as the example, just because he's probably the best example of it. There should have been guys through 2 months that could pick him up, and he wasn't really even cold for 2 months, like a month and a half, where they could have picked him up. Because at the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make, that I make on the show, is that all these metrics are super helpful, but at the end of the day, it's just, wins. Like, we want to win baseball games, and this team, it's so ridiculous to me that this team went 2 months being the worst offensive baseball. And like you said, I don't think they're great, but they're so much better than what they've shown. And, it's frustrating. I think it's something that Jed has to figure out organizationally, because now for the last 2 years, the highs have been insane and the lows have been, really low. And you have to kind of figure out a way to at least minimize the damage a little bit. But what I'm going to do is we're going to take a break, and coming up next, we're going to talk about some prospect stuff, because this is something that you're way more informed on than I am. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. This episode is brought to you by Stitch Fix. Love Stitch Fix. You know that instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good? That's what I get with Stitch Fix. Easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new, on-trend favorites that'll work for you. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want, no subscription required, and they send 5 just-for-me pieces plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. I keep what works and send back the rest. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy. I don't like to shop, and they save me that time and effort. Plus, I get outfits that make me look and feel really good, which is difficult. It's difficult to make me look good, especially my scrawny legs. And if you don't love that, if you don't think it makes you feel as good as you look, you could return it right away. Get started today at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $20 off your first fix. That's stitchfix.com/MLB for $20 off. Stitchfix.com/MLB. Must redeem within 7 days of sign up. Today's episode is also brought to you by Tax Network USA. Here on Locked On Cubs, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. And boy, would that be a story if we had playoff news for you. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals at Tax Experts USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 $100,000, or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. That's tnusa.com/lockedon. See the link in this episode description below. The Cubs play the Orioles Wednesday at 5:35 Central Time, and you can catch every pitch on the Cubs hometown broadcast on SiriusXM by searching Cubs on the SXM app. We are back here with Michael Cerami, and I want to ask Michael, kind of similar to my first question, how would you grade, and this is a hard question to answer, but how would you grade, and you don't actually have to give a grade, the 2024 farm system, guys that you were excited about heading into 2024? Where do you look at the farm system now and compared to what you did, let's say, in March? Is it better or worse? Are there any concerns? I know that's a tough question. I know Matt Shaw got off to a slow start, but he looks like he's kind of coming around and maybe ready for a promotion soon. That's kind of what I've been looking at. Where do you want to go with that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, as frustrating of a year as it has been in a lot of respects, the farm system has been incredibly. Sorry, is that my mic? I think I might have gotten some feedback. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
So, I mean, the farm system has been incredibly productive in a lot of ways that I think people are too quick to overlook. So on the one hand, you can start with the most basic level, which is that Jordan Wicks, I know he's been hurt a lot, which is a bummer, but he looked, in my opinion, way better than anyone is really giving him credit for before he went down. His velocity was up, his movement was better. His pretty much everything underlying statistics were better than his actual results. And for a rookie pitcher, that's more than okay, especially for a guy that's had some success last season already. He was still a prospect coming into the year. Michael Busch, also technically a prospect coming into the year, and he's been incredible. I know he's part of the farm system for 2 or 3 months of the offseason, and that's it, but that counts. We traded 2 members of our existing farm system for him. I'm counting that. Ben Brown, an absolutely incredible contributor right out of from the day after opening day when Justin Steele went down. Again, he's hurt, but like, how exciting is his presence, let alone his future? Pete Crow Armstrong, who, I know people are concerned about the offense. I'm not. It's been terrible so far. He's 22 years old and a elite defensive center fielder with incredible speed that can seemingly steal bases at will. And his defense is going to impact games way more than people realize. He doesn't need to become a 110 or above weighted runs created plus player to be super valuable. At 90, he's going to be like a 3-win player. At 100, he's like a 4 to 5-win player. That's very achievable for a guy as young as he is. So right there, you're talking about just guys that have contributed to the big leagues already. And there's a lot of them. And that's setting aside, frankly, a lot of members of the bullpen that have been forced into positions where they're contributing, like Porter Hodge or Luke Little, who I think have looked good, or Big last night, who was hitting 100 miles per hour in his major league debut against the Orioles. So again, those are all just people that have contributed. And I think that's a pretty significant group. And pretty much all of those people are, except for PCA, are not even the Cubs' top prospects at the moment. When you go down the list, and Cade Horton was humming along before he got hurt and was looking like he would have debuted by now, if not sometime in the second half, again, if he wasn't injured. And I really liked that he moved up to AAA, started facing at least a little bit of resistance for the first time, which is important for prospects. Moises Ballesteros is like that huge breakout bat who's doing things at AAA at his age that the only other players to have accomplished these same feats, specifically the combination of strikeout rate and whiff rate to power, it is all-star, superstar names in the big leagues. That doesn't mean he's going to have that value, but he's certainly on that track. And that's the sort of, out of nowhere big break you want to see. Matt Shaw had a slow start, but his last month and a half has been scorching hot. He's going to be in AAA sooner than later. And he's your first round pick from last year. James Triantos added power to his game, much needed power that had been sort of lacking, and sort of the one aspect of his game that was holding him back and sort of making him the type of prospect the Cubs were dangling in trades over the offseason. Owen Casey, still really young, but he's producing at AAA. He's not knocking down the door to the big leagues, but he's definitely performing well and lowering his strikeout rate slowly but surely while maintaining that in-game power. And you could go down the list. I mean, but I just named 4 or 5, guys still in the minors and then 4 or 5 that have already contributed that were all prospects before the season. That is an incredible bounty of players that have succeeded. But I would say Moises Ballesteros, and then again, this is not even including, Kevin Alcantara or Jefferson Rojas, but Moises Ballesteros is easily the big, exciting win. Especially every time I'm trying so hard not to get ahead of myself. When I see, I already believe in his bat. I think he could come up to the majors and hit right now. But I think that the difference of having no position at all and being a catcher is as night and day as a prospect value can ever get. And so whenever I see a highlight of his from an Iowa game where he's throwing out a runner or blocking a really great ball in the dirt or what, I'm like, oh my God, this close to having, if there were no questions about him sticking behind the plate, he's a top 5 prospect in baseball. He's a 20-year-old catcher hitting better than everybody at AAA. That's insane. So, that's a real thing to be excited about. But even setting that aside, when you have Matt Shaw, who can almost certainly, if he stays healthy, if that's what the cause of his most recent absence was, I don't think we really have a good understanding. No. But he did return to the lineup last night, so that's good to see. If he is going to continue to look as good as he has, you suddenly are less concerned about third base in the future there, and you're already not concerned about first base because of Michael Busch, and Dansby Swanson unfortunately isn't going anywhere. But at second base, you have Chris Morell can be an option. Nico Horner is obviously the guy right now. Michael Busch can also play second base.
I think that's his best position coming into the season.
And James Triantos is another guy that's coming up. So you look around the infield and you're like, okay, that's great. And that's setting aside the fact that the Cubs have excellent outfield prospects throughout their league or their system. So it's like the one thing that you really can't criticize Jed Hoyer for is but at the same time, it's like, well, what you needed to do to accomplish that was be bad for 2 years and trade all your players away, which you should have this good of a farm system, but he does. And they've hit on a couple of first round picks back to back. Cade Horton and Matt Shaw, neither of those guys they are both better thought of now than they were when they were drafted, which is the, definition of a draft win, right? So those are 2 pretty big wins for me. And then again, in addition to all that, they acquired Ben Brown, for David Robertson. That looks like a huge win. So a lot of these prospects are coming along and they're already contributing, and the rest of them are at like AA or higher. The biggest criticism, frankly, of the Cubs minor league system right now is that they have a cliff after AA, where almost all of their prospects are AA or higher, and not a lot of lower level guys standing up to fill in. But that's like, give me a break. The dream is to have as many guys as you can at AA and AAA, and hopefully some of them you use as assets to acquire big league talent, and the rest of them you correctly scout your own players and they become long-term big leaguers that lead the next great Cubs team. But for now, it's pretty hard to be anything but optimistic about the farm system, in particular, the guys here and the guys coming in the next 1 year.
Yeah, that was a lot of really good stuff. I think a criticism of the Cubs farm system, if there is one, has been, do they have that blue chip guy? Do they have Chris Bryant? Do they have Gunnar Henderson? And I think the truth is like nobody does, right? Those guys are super unique. I agree with what you said about PCA. I've said it on the show. The offensive floor that he has to reach to be successful is so low that if he could just find a way, we're talking about a guy that if he could figure out how to slash like 240, 300, 390, he's going to steal, a bunch of bases and play really good defense and be a really, really good player. So I feel good. And Matt Shaw, I think he's been the guy I really fell in love with his swing in spring training. And he's a guy, I'm probably the most high on him and excited to see him go to AAA. One more question before we head to break. And then I asked you the question everyone wants to hear you answer, not to startle you, but you mentioned him just now, and he's not a prospect anymore, but he's a young player, and it's Chris Morell. And I wanted to ask, obviously the Cubs have a lot of guys underperforming, and I don't want to sit here and pick on certain guys, but I think Morell is the guy that I want to hear you talk about, because early in the year, the trends were terrific. He was walking a ton. He cut down his strikeouts. The Cubs took this risk to put him at third base in order to make their lineup, beefier. And I just think overall, I think it's safe to say as we sit here, July, 24, that's been a really failed experiment. The third base experiment, and then Morell not hitting at the same time has been detrimental. And I was talking about on the show yesterday, just having Mastrobuoni in the last couple of games, you've just seen the value of somebody that could play the position at third. And then Mastrobuoni, crazily, just for a couple weeks, or not a couple weeks, but a couple starts, it has been better offensively. And it's like, I think it's been a really big issue. If I had to pick one, and there's a lot to pick from, the Cubs defense has been so much less than what I thought, although it's been better lately. And I just think Morell being there plus not hitting has really hurt the team. Are you still confident? This is the question. Are you still confident that Christopher Morell can be a really good major league player?
Yeah, but not a third baseman. I mean, I think that the start of the season, remember that first week, it was like, holy cow, this is awful.
Yeah.
And then it kind of stabled out for a couple weeks. I think it has come full circle, not all the way, not back to awful, unplayable like it was that first week, but it's pretty clear that he's not a third baseman defensively. Offensively, it's about as baffled as I've been on a player in a while, because I mean, it shows you maybe some of the shortcomings of certain advanced analytics, but when I think he just turned 25 a couple weeks ago, literally like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So when a effectively 24-year-old player is walking 12% of the time, only striking out 23% of the time for the season as a whole, and making as much and has a swing speed that is up there with the elite of the elite. It has exit velocities that are up there, and not just exit velocities, because, we've seen players like Dansby Swanson hit the ball hard, but on the ground often. Morell has the barrel rate to match it, which is, typically a combination of launch angle and exit velocity that is in the sweet spot of production. That
something Michael Busch has had a lot of success with.
Right. And so when you look at all of those things together, you're like, how is this guy not succeeding? And part of it, as much as no one wants to hear it, part of it is undoubtedly bad luck. But for the season as a whole, I just wrote about it today, the last 1 month, calendar month, which is a roughly 100 plate appearances for him, things have gone in the opposite direction. His walk rate has fallen. His strikeout rate has climbed. His hard contact has gone down. The BABIP has come up, and he's still not producing. So while there was some, I think, genuine bad luck at certain points in a season, at a certain point, you just do have to produce, and he's not producing right now. But if we were in any other position or not so close to this, I think I would look at Morell, a guy his age, with his cheap control, with his history, with 15 home runs before the All-Star break, with that walk rate overall for the season, the strikeout rate, I would go, well, this is a good guy to bet on. The problem is he doesn't have a defensive position, and that is an issue, because DH is not really, I mean, you really have to hit if you're going to have any value as the DH, because not only are you not adding any defensive value, you're taking away that position from other guys who could rest and improve their own performance by ways of matchups or days off. And they already have Seiya Suzuki, who's kind of not playing a great right field, when they have Cody Bellinger sitting right there, who could play right field with PCA in center. So Morell, that is a big, significant chunk of why the Cubs have been underperforming. And I think that's something they're going to have to look at. But if this season is lost, I couldn't think of anything better than letting him continue to hit every day as often as possible to see if he hits his way out of it and see what you have for next season. I think the worst thing they can do is abandon ship now, because I think he is at the low of his value despite strong underlying peripherals. I want to see if those play through. They don't always, and it doesn't have to, but I think he has a lot of talent, and I think anyone is being honest with themselves can see that. You just have to put it together.
Yeah, I agree. I think with Morell, I think sometimes what happens is the bad luck gets you, and when you're hitting the ball well and you don't get results, everyone always says in the game, okay, hey, if you just stay right there, you're going to be fine. Well, it's really hard to stay right there. And so he didn't get the results early, and now everything's fallen. My concern with Morell is just like, and I know this is kind of a casual take, but is he a baseball player? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like the fundamentals. Like I'll see stuff with Morell where, he'll just take a call right down the middle, and he won't be sure about the zone. He'll be like, maybe that wasn't a strike. And it's like, dude, it's right down the middle. Like, do you actually have an idea of the strike zone? Those type of things. I get concerned with him. But yeah, I hope it turns around with him. But to your point, time might be running out a little bit, just because if he doesn't have a position, the Cubs can't, keep gambling.
Yeah, I mean, that is shortening his time, no doubt about it. If he had a defensive position, it'd be a whole different story.
Right.
And as far as time running out, like I said, assuming the Cubs aren't actually going to
this year's the year to roll it out.
Let's see what happens, right? Like, there's
same with Amaya.
Yeah, honestly,
let those guys play. You're 6-7 under. Now, maybe if you rattle off 6-7 in a row, that would change. But right now,
absolutely, completely agree. And the only thing that we need to know is, going into the offseason, is Morell a player that's going to be on the 2025 Cubs in a significant, everyday starting role? We don't need to know that right now. And that's why, because they're bad, the team is bad. Yeah. That's why I'm like not super stressed about it, because I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's actually good. Let's see what happens over the next 3 months.
Yeah, cool. Coming up next, one more question, and the question I'm most excited to ask Michael about. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. The experience of searching for and then buying tickets on Game Time is simple. Plus, Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So I want to close out, Michael. I had two questions for you. I'm only going to go with one. I was going to ask you about Counsell and just kind of his. I totally overestimated the impact a manager can have on a team. Like, it's probably, I've come on this show, and when you do a daily podcast, you get a lot of stuff right. You get a lot of stuff wrong. It's just how it works when you're recording every day. There's nothing I got wrong more. Like, I thought Craig Counsell, and I still think he's a better manager than what we had, but I overestimated the impact he would have. And like, even today, I saw you guys, I don't know if it was you or Brett, posted an article. I haven't read it yet about Craig, and just saying like something like, don't try and get Craig Counsell to tell you it's a big stretch, just like his personality in general. But we'll leave that for another time, because I think you and I probably feel the same about it. I want to ask you about Jed. I believe after this year, he has one more year left on his deal. And you don't typically like to have a lame duck president of baseball ops, because, you see this in the NBA all the time. Some guy will make a huge heroic deal to save his job. And what's the repercussions if it doesn't work? He was going to lose his job regardless. So what do you think is in store for the offseason for Jed Hoyer? Number one, do you think his job is at all in jeopardy? Do you think he'll get extended? What do you think, Tom Ricketts thinks of his performance, if you had to guess?
Yeah. So I think I have a couple thoughts on this. One, and so the lame duck argument, I think, is absolutely correct. It's not what you want, obviously. That's pretty common theme throughout sports. I will say the one giant caveat, which is funny, is typically the concern is what happens if that guy mortgages his future in some big deal.
Does it. Yeah.
And Jed Hoyer doesn't do that.
Yeah,
Jed Hoyer doesn't make deals like that. And
right.
I genuinely think it's not. I don't think it's not in him. I think he thinks it's dumb to do things that way. Whether that's right or wrong is beside the point. And so I don't think that even if he were a lame duck president, thinking his job was on the line, that he would go out and trade a bunch of players for whomever and sign Juan Soto to a $600 million deal because he thinks if he doesn't, he's going to get fired. Like, I do not see that happening anyway, so that's maybe an okay, a silver lining for us, as we don't have to worry about it quite as much. I think, though, that setting aside what I think Tom Ricketts thinks, which I think is difficult, I would say that his job has to be at least on the line. He has to at least be on the hot seat, right? If they don't make the playoffs, which is looking pretty likely, with one exception, and I'll get there, but he cannot finish this season. Last year was like, okay, listen, you guys failed. You came a game short. You tried, you added Jamer Candelario at the deadline. Jose Quast wasn't enough of a relief help, but you at least sort of tried, but it was sort of the first transition year. You finished over 500. We understand it wasn't the final product. They were trying to win this year. This was a team that was expected and hoping and planning to win, and they are the last place team in the NL Central and one of the worst teams in the National League. Failure. Doesn't matter what has happened. And I know, at least I can speak for Bleacher Nation, Brett and I, if at any point in that final offseason or that first offseason press conference, the excuse goes to the volume of injuries, that's not happening. I understand that there was a lot of injuries. Doesn't matter. That it wasn't good enough. Everyone's been healthy for a while. We've run into bad pitching since that string of facing like an ace every other day for a while. I mean, that happened, but not in a while. It is really, really bad. And it's pretty clear. And so at a minimum, I can say that for Bleacher Nation, we will be calling for his position to at least be under scrutiny. Like, this is no longer, let's see what happens. He's got it. It's like, no, he either they need to commit to a path that makes more sense and is satisfying and therefore gives him more time, or they need to cut bait and go in a different direction and get a manager or a president that's going to be under control for a longer period of time. I think that there is one exception, though, and this is the point that I was going to circle back to. I could see, and I think this is just me hoping more than any sort of reality, because again, this isn't Jed Hoyer's style, but I could see a version of this playing out where the Cubs sort of middle out from here until the trade deadline. They don't fully tank and lose every game. They don't rattle off a winning streak like last year that thrust them back into competition. And so there's a moderate sell-off, maybe Jameson Taillon, who could be replaced by a dozen starting pitchers that the Cubs have pretty well stacked of. Maybe you trade Nico Horner and you try somebody else at second base, Matt Shaw, Chris Morell, Michael Busch, any of them. And you sort of rejigger that way with the literal one singular bonus addition of a big time trade acquisition of a player with more than a half season of control. So, we could say Vladimir Guerrero Jr. That's not, I don't know if that's going to happen. I know that they've had interest in the past, and I've talked to the Blue Jays about it in the past. No idea if that's going to be the case now. Not even saying that's the player. That model where he went, you know what? We saw an opportunity to go out and get a good player and do some of our offseason buying for next season right now. And we did that. So we're already demonstrating to Tom Ricketts, to the fans, to the organization, to the team. Yeah, we came up short this year. We had to trade some of our, better players. Cody Bellinger's gone, Nico's gone, Taillon's gone, but we can replace those guys internally. And we've made a big acquisition to demonstrate to you that next year is important to us. And we're not taking this sidestep that's going to, avoid addressing what is clearly the giant elephant in the room, that it has not been good enough. So that's the path that I'm like hoping can happen still. We've seen teams do that in the past. It's rare, but it's not unheard of. And I think that there is always those players available, and you just don't always realize it because those conversations don't tend to come to light. That's what I'm holding out hope for. That would at least give me some confidence to say, okay, listen, he realizes now that he's got to get a lot more serious, and he's putting his money or his transactions where his mouth is, and not just saying, hey, injuries and bad luck and this and that.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I agree with most of that. And thanks for coming on, man. It was really awesome to have you on. I gotta let you get back to work. The Cubs just announced the lineup. I just got the pop up. Looks like Morell is playing third, but it's probably because Imanaga's pitching and he doesn't really get at ground balls anyway. But yeah, guys, please check out Bleacher Nation, bleachernation.com. Brett's been there. He created it. Michael's been there for a while. It's a really, really good way to get day-to-day information. And it's like a really perfect combination of, stuff that like fans will think, but also like a professional perspective as well. So we really appreciate you coming on. You're welcome anytime, man. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you guys so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Cubs. You give us 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll give you all things Cubs with a laugh or two along the way. Be sure to hit subscribe on YouTube, smash the like button for the algorithm, and leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. I'm Sam Olber. He was Michael Cerami, and this was Locked On Cubs.